Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Allison's sudden reappearance shattered the fragile peace Chelsea had carefully built over the past 2 years. Life had been quiet, almost too quiet, a soft rhythm of work, late-night photography edits, and the occasional weekend trip with friends. But the quiet vanished the moment Chelsea saw her standing across the street from the coffee shop Chelsea always stopped at before work, wearing the same half-smile that used to send shivers of both excitement and dread down her spine. At first, Chelsea convinced herself it was a coincidence. The city was big, but not impossibly big. People crossed paths. Faces from the past resurfaced. But then, Allison began showing up more often. Not just outside the coffee shop, but at the lobby of the photo studio where Chelsea worked, leaning casually against the wall as if she had been invited. The encounters were polite at first, short greetings, awkward small talk, but beneath Allison's calm voice was a persistence that made Chelsea's stomach knot. It wasn't long before Allison abandoned the pretense. She began speaking as if their separation had been a mistake, something to be corrected. "We had something real," she told Chelsea one evening, her eyes locked in that unblinking way that used to feel intimate but now felt invasive. "Don't pretend you've forgotten." Chelsea, trying to keep her voice steady, asked her to stay away. She didn't want a scene. She didn't want drama. But Allison's answer wasn't words, it was the faintest, knowing smile before she walked away. 3 days later, a delivery arrived at the studio. A bouquet of lilies and pale roses, flowers they used to buy together after long Sunday mornings in bed. The card inside read, "For the best times we ever had." Chelsea's fingers went cold. The handwriting was the same, looping, careful, a little too neat. She told herself she would throw the flowers away, but they sat on her desk all day, an unwanted reminder of something she couldn't decide was nostalgia or warning. The flowers were only the beginning. The next week brought a series of gift books they had once read together, a framed photo of a beach they had visited years ago, a playlist sent through email with the subject line, "For when you miss me." Chelsea deleted the message without listening. But every gift was a signal that Allison wasn't going anywhere. Then Allison began reaching out to Chelsea's friends. It started subtly, casual questions to people at the coffee shop, a polite introduction to one of Chelsea's colleagues at the gym. But soon, the conversations became invasive questions about Chelsea's schedule, her habits, her projects. A friend told Chelsea that Allison had asked whether she was seeing anyone. Another friend mentioned Allison knew where Chelsea's next photography exhibition would be, even though Chelsea hadn't posted about it publicly. Chelsea realized the boundaries weren't just being tested, they were being erased. The places she once felt safe, her coffee shop, her studio, the quiet back room of her gym, were no longer hers alone. And then came the first truly strange event, an edited photo on Chelsea's social media, her smiling face altered into something eerie, the background subtly changed to a place she didn't recognize. It appeared and disappeared in minutes, but not before a coworker messaged her about it. The incidents escalated. A photo project Chelsea had been preparing for months was sabotaged, files mysteriously deleted, prints ruined with ink. One morning, she opened her email to find a photo of herself asleep in bed. The lighting suggested it had been taken inside her apartment. The angle suggested someone had stood close, leaning over her. She felt the air in her lungs turn heavy. Chelsea changed the locks the next day. She installed an extra chain. She told herself this would be enough. But then the company party happened. It was meant to be an easy evening, music, laughter, a few drinks. Chelsea kept her guard up but tried to relax. That was until she noticed Allison at the edge of the room. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't on the guest list. Chelsea was about to approach when a commotion broke out. A colleague had collapsed, his head striking the corner of a table. As people rushed to help, Chelsea's gaze fell on the half-empty drink glass beside him. A creeping certainty formed in her gut. She realized with horror that the drink was meant for her. Allison's face, just visible through the crowd, was calm. Too calm. The colleague survived, but Chelsea's world shifted. Allison's actions had crossed into something far more dangerous. It wasn't just harassment, Anna Marie, it was violence, whether intended or accidental. And it was getting closer. Days later, Chelsea came home late, the hallway to her apartment unusually quiet. Her heart stuttered when she saw the door frame splintered. The lock had been forced. On the door itself, a photograph was pinned with a silver pushpina photo of the two of them together from years ago, smiling at a street fair. The edges of the photo were worn, as if it had been carried for a long time. That night, Chelsea checked her phone and found a voicemail from an unknown number. Allison's voice, low and deliberate, filled the room. "If I can't have you, no one can." Her mind spun. The message wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The party incident, the break-in, the stalking, it was all leading toward something final. And now Chelsea began to wonder if Allison was even acting entirely on her own. There had been moments, subtle but undeniable, when Allison's behavior felt almost guided. Her words sometimes didn't feel like hers, her eyes holding a distant glaze. Was there someone else pulling the strings? Or something? Chelsea's nights became restless, every creak in her apartment setting her on edge. She caught herself scanning the faces of strangers on the street, half expecting Allison to appear from behind them. Friends urged her to go to the police, but the proof was fragmented, just enough to raise suspicion, not enough to bring charges. And if Allison was being manipulated, confronting her directly might push her into something irreversible. Yet Chelsea also knew that doing nothing meant giving Allison time. And time was exactly what she couldn't afford. The invisible pressure around her life was tightening, the sense that she was being drawn toward a place she couldn't yet see but would soon have to face. Chelsea's life narrowed into a constant state of hypervigilance. She measured every shadow, listened for the faintest unfamiliar sound, and felt her chest tighten whenever the phone rang. Allison's presence had become less about physical appearances and more about an unseen influence and unshakable awareness that she was never alone, even in locked rooms. The strange edits to her photos had stopped for a week, but Chelsea knew better than to think it was over. The silence felt calculated, like the pause before a storm. Her sleep was broken by dreams that weren't hers, fragments of memories she couldn't recall living, places she didn't recognize but woke from as if she had been there hours ago. She suspected that if Allison was being driven by something else, it wasn't just a metaphor. It was beginning to reach into her too. One afternoon, while working alone at the studio, Chelsea noticed the front door wasn't fully closed. She was certain she had locked it. The space was still, but she could feel the residue of someone's presence. On her desk was a small velvet pouch. Inside, she found an old silver key, tarnished but still cold from the outside air. Attached to it was a thin piece of paper with 2 words written in black ink. "You remember." She didn't remember. That was the worst part. The police officer she spoke to later that night warned her that without evidence of a crime in progress, the most they could do was file a report. Chelsea kept the key in a sealed envelope, unsure if it was bait, a clue, or both. She began reviewing every interaction with Allison in her mind, trying to find the thread that would explain not just her persistence, but the strange, almost orchestrated sequence of events. Meanwhile, Allison's moves were growing bolder. She no longer lingered in the background, but began appearing in moments that felt almost ritualistic, standing at the far end of a hallway, watching through the glass at the gym entrance, waiting outside the building as Chelsea left late from work. Each time, she didn't chase or call out. She just watched. And each time, Chelsea felt the pull of that gaze more strongly, as if some part of her was being drawn toward Allison without her consent. The turning point came when Chelsea's colleague, still recovering from the head injury at the party, confided that someone had been asking about the exact moment he collapsed. Not asking out of concern, asking to confirm whether Chelsea had been standing in that spot seconds before he drank from the glass. The implication was clear, it had been a near miss. Chelsea wasn't simply a target of obsession, she was in the path of a calculated plan that might already have failed once. The break-in at her apartment returned to her mind in sharper detail. The splintered doorframe. The photo pinned there. But she now suspected something else had been left behind, something she hadn't noticed. She searched every corner of the apartment and finally found it, A folded scrap of paper slipped between the couch cushions. On it was an address in a part of the city she rarely visited, along with a date only 2 days away. She didn't know if it was a warning or an invitation, but the thought of doing nothing was worse. The location turned out to be an abandoned townhouse, its windows boarded, the front gate chained but easy to step over. Inside, the air smelled of dust and something metallic. Faded photographs were scattered across the floor, most of them ruined by water damage, but a few intact, each one featuring Chelsea in some way. Not staged portraits, but moments from her actual life, walking to work, sitting at a park bench, browsing books in a store. Someone had been documenting her for far longer than she had realized. And then there was the final photo in the pile. It was of Allison, but her expression was unlike anything Chelsea had seen. Her eyes were wide and unfocused, her face pale, as if she was listening to someone just out of frame. Behind her, in the blurred background, a shadowed figure seemed to lean close, whispering into her ear. Chelsea felt her pulse in her throat. This was more than fixation, this was surveillance, manipulation, and possibly control. If Allison was indeed acting under the influence of another person or whatever that figure represented, then confronting her directly would be dangerous. But if she didn't confront her, the chain of events would keep tightening until it snapped. That night, Chelsea received a final message, a single voice note, 30 seconds long. The sound was not just Allison's voice but another, lower tone beneath it, speaking in unison. The words were distorted but unmistakable. Come to me, or I'll come for you. She knew the time for police reports and cautious avoidance was over. Whatever this was, it had its own momentum now, and she was being pulled toward the center of it. The question was whether she would step into the confrontation on her own terms or be dragged there without warning. Somewhere, Allison was waiting, and whatever waited with her would not stop until Chelsea crossed the last threshold. The choice, if it could be called that, was slipping away. And the gates, whatever they were beginning to open. The townhouse address lingered in Chelsea's mind like a bruise. She couldn't shake the image of Allison's face in that final photo, hollow-eyed, leaning toward something unseen. The figure in the background haunted her most of all, not because it was clearly defined, but because it wasn't. It was the kind of presence the human brain tries not to see, something your eyes slide over until it's too late. She considered going straight to the police with the photographs, but the voice note changed everything. That layered, impossible harmony of Allison's voice and another underneath wasn't just a thread, it was a tether pulling her in. Chelsea realized with unsettling clarity that if she didn't go to Allison or whatever controlled her would come to her. And when that happened, she wouldn't be ready. Chelsea's preparations were clumsy at first. She dug out an old DSLR camera, not for art but for evidence. She carried a small voice recorder in her jacket pocket. At the hardware store, she bought a heavy flashlight and a box cutter, the only weapons she felt she could realistically use. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. If this ended badly, she didn't want anyone else caught in the orbit. The address from the note drew her back. Night had fallen by the time she reached the boarded townhouse again, and the stillness around it felt wrong, too complete, as if the city itself had stepped back. The chain on the gate was gone. The door, once stuck in its frame, now stood slightly ajar. Inside, the layout seemed different. Hallways stretched longer than they should, corners turned into dim corridors she didn't remember from before. The air felt colder the further she walked in, and the dust was gone, replaced by the faint scent of lilies and roses, the same flowers Allison had sent to her studio. Chelsea heard footsteps before she saw her. Allison stepped from the shadows of what should have been the living room, dressed in black, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she almost looked like the Allison Chelsea once knew. But then her eyes caught the light, and something in them reflected back not one gleam, but two. You came, Allison said, but the second voice, the one from the recording, spoke the same words at the same time, pitched lower, vibrating in Chelsea's bones. Chelsea's mouth was dry. Let her go. Allison smiled faintly, tilting her head. She's not a prisoner. She's mine. We share everything now, even you. The walls around them seemed to close in, not physically but perceptually, as if the house itself was leaning forward to listen. Chelsea could feel it. Then the figure from the photograph was here, unseen, but close enough that the hair on her arms lifted. She realized that whatever this was, it fed on connection, on bonds stretched to breaking. And Allison's obsession had been the perfect doorway. "This isn't you," Chelsea said, stepping closer. "You didn't start this." For a flicker of a second, Allison's eyes darted toward the floor, her hands tightening at her sides. But then the second voice surged, drowning her out. "Stay." Chelsea pulled the camera from her bag and snapped a photo, the flash cutting a white scar through the dim room. Allison flinched, not from the light, but as if the act of recording had disrupted something. The second voice faltered, and Allison's breathing hitched. Taking the chance, Chelsea stepped forward, closing the distance. "You wanted the best times back? Then you know this isn't it. You know this isn't love." The next moments blurred. The walls groaned like old wood under strain. Allison staggered, one hand to her temple as if fighting something inside. The air grew heavier, pressing against Chelsea's chest, urging her to leave, to abandon her. But she stayed. "Allison, listen to me," she said, her voice shaking but loud. "I'm not coming with you. And you're not coming with me. It ends here." For the first time, Allison's voice came alone, small and human. "I can't." "Yes, you can." The lights in the room, what little there were, flickered violently. The smell of flowers turned to something acrid, like burnt metal. The second voice roared, wordless this time, and the shape in the corner of Chelsea's vision seemed to swell. She raised the camera again, snapping photo after photo. Each flash made the air shudder, the presence flinch. Allison's knees buckled, and Chelsea caught her before she hit the ground. The roar became a hiss, then silence. The weight in the air lifted, so abruptly it left her dizzy. When Chelsea opened her eyes fully, they were alone. The house was as it had been in daylight, dusty, small, and utterly ordinary. Allison lay in her arms, pale and exhausted, her breathing shallow but steady. In the days that followed, Allison disappeared from Chelsea's life entirely, not in the obsessive, stalking way, but in the way someone moves away, starts over, and doesn't look back. Chelsea never received an explanation. She kept the photos she had taken that night locked away, unable to decide if they proved anything or if they were just another layer of the nightmare. She never saw the shadowed figure again. But sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, Chelsea could swear she heard the faint scent of lilies in the air, and she would wonder not if the gates had closed, but if they were simply waiting to open again.